Every entrepreneur has a story. Welcome to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur, where each episode your host, Brian Carney, will share a drink with a successful business owner and have them discuss their unique journey, gaining insight on what it takes to be an entrepreneur and the different ways to get there. Brian isn't just a beer nerd, he's also the co-founder of River's Edge Advisors, a financial planning firm headquartered in Delaware, specializing in working with business owners. It's time to pour yourself a drink and enjoy a happy half hour with an entrepreneur.
Hey everyone, welcome to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur. I am your host, Brian Carney. My guest today is Natasha Miller. Her path is unlike anything you've heard before. She was forced out of her home by a relationship with her mother and taken to a youth shelter on Christmas night, all before overcoming all of that and becoming a wildly successful business owner. She's now the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company called Entire Productions. She's also an author of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Relentless Homeless Teen to Achieving the Entrepreneur Dream, which came out last March. Natasha, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Brian.
Awesome. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. So now we have a bit of a time zone difference here since I'm in Delaware and you're in San Francisco. And, it's not appropriate really for you to be drinking. So I'm going to be doing the heavy lifting here. I'm going to be giving a sample to All Green Everything by Other Half Brewing. So we'll give it a review at the end.
Okay.
Well, thanks again for joining me. And well, first, tell me a little bit about your company and what you do.
Sure. Entire Productions is an event and entertainment production company, and our clients are Google and Salesforce and Apple and LinkedIn and all of the big tech companies that live in San Francisco, a lot of startups that are venture funded, and we've been in business for over 20 years.
Wow.
So it's been a blast.
I bet. So that's interesting. So if Google, for instance, wants to create an event for their people,
Yep.
hire you and you design it from start to finish?
We do. We also provide entertainment of every genre and every discipline, from local to headline talent to other event productions. So sometimes we're planning the whole thing from A to Z. Sometimes we're just bringing in the talent.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. That seems like a fun business to be involved in.
I mean, it's a blast. The conversations and the words that come out of our mouths are somewhat ridiculous. Like, the woman in the lobster outfit costume is pregnant. She won't let anyone borrow her costume. Or, is our snake charmer back in town? Or, it's crazy. It's crazy wonderful.
What's the craziest thing that you've ever put into an event? Like if you look back and go, I can't believe we actually did that.
Oh, this is funny. It was for a Google event. And it was this guy who, it's kind of gross, but he's into torture devices. So he would lay on a bed of nails and he would put a nail down through his nose, just weird things. That's probably one of the weirdest. We had a woman that was balancing and walking on champagne bottles in stiletto heels.
Wow.
Don't get me started. A lot of this is on the website, entireproductions.com. The photos and the videos are mind-blowing.
That has to be pretty crazy.
We're in a wild kind of city, right?
For sure. Yeah.
We get away with a lot of potentially naughty adjacent things.
Yeah. Things right up against the line. I always wonder when someone is walking on champagne bottles and stilettos, how they find out that they have that talent. But that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I want to know.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk quickly about your upbringing and everything that you've had to overcome. You can't really write this. It sort of seems like a movie script almost. So talk a little bit about how that shaped you and your, how you wrote your book and all that.
Yes. So growing up in the mid 80s, I think this is an important part to really think about. Growing up in the mid 80s in the Midwest, there was no Oprah, right? There wasn't a lot of access to hearing about other people's experiences. So if you were experiencing something challenging, there wasn't a whole lot of places to turn.
Right.
So as a young girl being mistreated by my mother. And honestly, my dad not intervening. He wasn't inflicting the damage on me, but I
Wasn't
think
helping.
wasn't helping. It was horrific. It was
Yeah.
horrific. And no one was coming to save me. And I was always waiting, yearning, begging, wanting someone to see me as valuable enough to want to save me.
Sure.
And, people come in and out of your lives and give you opportunities, but nobody's going to, even today, no one's going to come and save someone
Right.
for the most part. So yes, I was, verbally, sometimes physically, emotionally abused, told this is in the book, but my mother had said to me pretty much every day, either with words and actions or just emotionally, I hate you.
Oh,
I want to kill you I'd rather go to jail than have to look at you.
oh my God.
That shapes a person's whole
Yeah.
person,
I mean, especially in those formative years.
Right. And it all came to a head when I was 16 on Christmas Day. And, she had threatened to kill me many, 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 many times. But for some reason, on this occasion, I felt like, oh God, it could actually happen.
Oh, wow.
So that combined with I was older, right?
Mhm.
Some courage and bravery. I called 911.
Yeah.
Now you'll read in the book, the police came, but they left me there
Oh my God.
because I wasn't gushing with blood and I didn't have broken bones. And those were the parameters in which the authorities could come in and help someone. Unfortunately, I think
Yeah.
that's changed
I sure hope so.
since then.
Yeah.
But they gave my dad a card that said, if you don't think she's safe here, you can take her to the youth shelter. So I packed a hefty garbage bag full of whatever I could grab and ended up staying there for some time. And I can't recall how long, but when there was talk of foster care being, implemented, I was like, no way. I was studying as a classical violinist. I was very serious about that talent and that opportunity I had. So I ended up unofficially emancipated
Oh my.
and have lived on my own since then.
So obviously there's a lot to unpack there that, when you're 16, just thinking back when I was 16, you're so not emotionally equipped to handle the severity of that situation. Right. How were you able to get not only through that, but thrive at the other end?
I had this engine burning inside of me and I did have a musical talent.
Right.
I think, I wasn't like off the charts prodigy, but for little Des Moines, Iowa, I was considered somewhat of a prodigy.
Yeah.
And I had really, honestly, a very loving high school boyfriend.
Wow.
Who helped me through. God, he had no idea what he was getting into.
Right.
I didn't even really
Sure.
know, but he was a great help. And my orchestra conductor, Diane Pope, was an amazing help. Not to get me out of the homelessness, but to really bolster my confidence and show me opportunities.
Yeah.
So I did not ever think that I would get to where I am today. It wasn't accessible to me. This life I have now wasn't in the cards. I wanted to be a professional performing artist.
Yeah.
And I thought I had a shot at, scraping by in New York and maybe being on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a big deal.
Right.
But it's far from what I have now. And for me and my lifestyle, much better.
No doubt. No doubt. So you emancipate. Where do you go?
Yeah. You go. So the first place I went to was my grandmother's home for a short period of time. And I'd like to introduce some ironies here in the story. Number one, what was my dad's job at this time? He worked for the city of Des Moines for the Homeless Coalition.
Oh, wow.
What was his mother's claim to fame? My grandmother, she wrote self-help books for family communications. There's literally a book that she published called Help Your Child for Life. And gosh, I can't remember the other books. She wrote 7 of them.
Oh my God. You can't make that up.
You can't. And here's the deal. It didn't occur to me back then how ironic and weird this whole thing was.
Yeah. That is so
I didn't have
crazy.
time to
Sure.
draw those lines. So I ended up in a 2-bedroom basement apartment in Des Moines, surrounded by adults, right? Adults and elderly people.
Yeah.
And, you know, my landlord at the time was like smoking bongs all day. And, you know, I was working full time at a restaurant as a hostess because I was too young to serve
Right.
dinner because
Yeah.
of the, you know, the age of serving alcohol. So I made my way through. And again, I didn't know at that time that I would definitely make it, but I
Right.
knew at that time that I definitely wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to I didn't want to be a career restaurant worker.
Yep.
I wanted to be a performance artist, and I was good enough, and I practiced.
Yeah.
I really, really honed in, laser focused. I was very disciplined. You know, when you play classical violin and you're studying with a college professor at the age of, how old was I? 13 when I started. You practice sometimes 6 to 8 hours a day.
Right.
And you skip school to practice. To make sure that you're in good shape for that next lesson.
Wow.
That's what I did.
That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about your transition to being a professional violinist and jazz vocalist. So how does that come to be, and how did that career end up?
So I started playing professionally, just meaning that someone was going to pay me to play.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't a full-time job.
Sure.
My first gig was at 15 years old, playing for the inauguration of our governor.
Oh man.
I got the taste of that ability to exchange my talent for money.
Yeah.
Especially when I was on my own. I was all in.
I'm sure.
So I continued to play at weddings and social events, both playing the violin and singing. Now, was this making up most of the money at this point? No. But in college, I was really good and interested in graphic design and marketing and branding. And I had ads in bridal magazines, which really were effective back then because the internet was not up and rocking yet.
Sure.
And I was getting double and triple booked. And instead of turning them down, I would hire my violin professors and members of the symphony and, you know, people from my college orchestra. And I was basically running a business without really knowing it. To me, I was just not turning down opportunities that were coming to me.
You're like a violinist broker.
Yeah. So I was out playing an event with my string quartet while 2, 3, or 4 others were out playing their events, and I was making money on all of their events.
Amazing. That's amazing. So is that when you got sort of the first entrepreneurial bug? Like, hey, this is actually a business that I can create.
Yes. Yes. And I think that my situation, my predicament, made me look at anything that I was potentially good at or a little, you know, pretty good at, I would monetize.
Yeah.
So I was a lettering artist. I started doing people's wedding invitations, and, you know, the biggest gigs I got were to design stuff for or letter things for an ad agency. And almost everything that I'm good at, I end up turning into a business, and it's almost like I can't help myself.
Yeah.
Even today, like I wrote this book, I wrote it, I took a deep dive into publishing paths, into marketing. And, you know, that was 4 full years of like just heads down, asking questions, grilling people, grilling publishers, grilling agents, like really figuring out what the world is in publishing right now, figuring out my own path. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to teach other people how to write their own story and memoir, figure out what the publishing path is for them that would be most beneficial, and also how to market it to a bestseller. And I don't mean just Amazon bestseller. If you can't figure out how to make your book a bestseller on Amazon, then you're just lazy.
You're right.
Right.
So, yeah. So, all right. So that's really interesting. So that is like pure serial entrepreneur where everything you've done, you figured out how to make money from it. And I think one of the mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs do is they have a quote unquote business where they're doing work, but not actually getting paid, which is cool on the one hand, but hey, you actually need to make a living at some point. So that's really interesting that you've been able to do that throughout your entire life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I don't know, there's no way we're going to ever find out, is it nature or nurture?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something I was born with intuitively, or is it something that I had to grow into to survive?
Yeah.
It's a question that I don't even bother to think about. There's no way to know.
Well, as I was doing some research for our conversation today, I came across your website, and one word really, I think, on your website kind of embodies you and your experience. And it's really coming through even more now that we're talking, is grit.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you've had every opportunity to just like kind of pack it in, but you keep grinding it, and that grit really has sort of sharpened you into the person that you are, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. Listen, it's my drug and my addiction is having an idea and being able to create a life of its own around it. Mm-hmm. It is intoxicating and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And I personally, as a human being, don't enjoy necessarily some of the things that other people enjoy. And I find myself rubbing up against that, like, oh, I wish I wanted to go out and party, or I wish, I don't even know what it feels like to say, oh, I need a cocktail. Like I hear people saying that, but I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I don't like going on vacation. I love my life here.
Yeah.
So, it's just the way you look at it. I should just be happy that I'm here in my space and happy. But I just got back from a 2-week vacation in Italy, which was phenomenal. I was with my 26-year-old daughter, Bennett, but also the whole time I just wanted to be home.
Right.
I don't think people feel that way in general.
No, I think you're right. Well, and you talk about how you're able to help people and you can teach people how to really enjoy their work life and B, their regular life. Right. And a lot of the things, like, I think if you would ask a lot of the people that you talk to and you said, hey, I can teach you how to take a 2-week vacation to Italy, they'd say, oh my God, please, whatever it takes, let me get there. And you're like, yeah, cool, but I'd rather be home. So how are you able to help people sort of figure out what they really love to do and help them create a better life?
I've taken these stances. So I'm not really a life coach or I do what I really know how to do. And that is one, I like to help entrepreneurs scale and grow their companies by 50% or more. For me, the first 12 years of my business were, it was just a lifestyle business. And then I scaled and grew it and really know a lot now about, being on the Inc. 5000 list 3 times in a row, growing by 65% or more every year.
Yeah.
So I know how to help people do that. I know how to help people work on their business as a strategist and an advisor and a visionary, teaching people why it's important to write your own story and not necessarily only or first write a subject matter book on something that you're really, an expert at. There's so much noise out there in the business world, right? But I'm going to tell you right now, my experience with writing this memoir, which is, who knows how it was going to come out. Right. It's been incredible. And the responses I'm getting, the reviews I'm getting, the Facebook posts, the DMs are so deep and so interesting. I am actually impacting people's lives positively without telling them a prescriptive how to do. Right? You don't have to get your pencil and paper out while you're reading or listening to the book. I think people will be inspired. And I didn't write the book as an inspirational, motivational book either.
Right.
So I think it's so important because people now they know me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you how much they know me. They know if you read the book or listen to it, which I suggest you listen to it because it has incredible surprise in it. There's music woven through the entire Audible version.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Of my music.
And did you read
it?
Okay.
I voiced it. And it sounds great. Like it's hard to listen to Audible books if the author isn't a good narrator, or if they've hired another narrator that really
Yes.
you can tell isn't attached to what they're reading. And
They're dry reading a script, basically.
you can also hear that they don't understand what they're reading, which is always interesting.
Definitely.
But the point is to help people write their own story and help them get their message and experience out into the world. Because if you are a successful entrepreneur, you've already gone through at least one hero's journey story, but probably many more.
Right. Well,
Right?
explain what you mean by that. Because I'm sort of thinking one of the things, so if you're teaching people how to write, like a life story,
Mhm.
my first gut is, does anybody care about my life? Like my story might not be of interest to people. So tell me what you mean by,
Yeah.
having a hero story of you.
Well, you have a successful business,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes.
that's going to set you apart already.
Yeah.
That's not going to necessarily set you apart from your entrepreneurial crowd. Right.
Yep.
But people coming up,
Yep.
it might, impact. And there's things in my book that I never talked about. I would say never admitted, but never talked about with my best friend or my therapist.
Wow.
And they're very vulnerable and raw
Oh,
things
I'm sure.
that at 51, I feel confident that I can put that kind of thing out without being judged or without business saying, oh no, she wrote that, I'm not going to work with them anymore. Like I'm
Mhm.
to the place. So I think that's really important, to figure out when you're writing your own story, who your audience is, where you are on your own path, what you actually have to give to other people.
Yeah.
And so if I can help somebody write their story, publish it and market it, and they have the outcome is the experience I'm getting,
Yeah.
I'm all in.
Yeah. Well, I'd imagine, talking about being as vulnerable as you are, there had to be some, a cathartic experience for going through and writing this whole thing. And to be able, it has to be such an amazing feeling that your story, while you didn't set out with the intention to inspire people, is inspiring people. That has to be amazing.
It's amazing. It is. So for me, it's much bigger than book sales, than income from the book, from speaking, from things that kind of peel off from there. I read a review of someone. I had just gone through security at SFO, and I was waiting for my daughter, check my phone, and I read this Facebook message post from someone, a man in Colorado. I didn't know him. And he had 3 photos of the book underlined in very important places to him. And he wrote this just amazing overview. And he wrote, "This is the book I wish I had the courage to write."
Wow. That's
So now I'm
amazing.
like bawling. And my daughter comes up to me knowing that I'm like hesitant to travel. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm fine."
That
I'm
is
really impacting people's lives.
Yeah. That's incredible though. That's,
Yeah.
to your point, that's way more than, that's probably way stronger than any dollar figure that could be.
Mhm. And here's the deal, Brian. This is the biggest surprise to me, is how many men are reading it or
Yeah.
listening to it, and how many men are coming forward with their responses, their outcomes, but also their own challenges in life.
Yes.
I know that this book gives people a voice,
Mhm.
if they weren't able to express themselves, to see someone like me,
Right.
right? I'm all over the place, right? I'm on social media everywhere. I'm a pretty public person, and now people know things about me that are pretty taboo,
Yeah.
right? It's not cocktail talk.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so that then informs them, oh, if she's doing that, I might be able to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And that, it's sort of the pay it forward type of scenario where you're inspiring one person and that person inspires one person and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
And again, I
Um,
didn't set out to do that, but I'm so thankful that is what's happening.
Yeah, no, that is amazing. And the one thing you talk a little bit about on your website, which I find fascinating, and it seems like this might be, tied in with the book, is that you help work with people that sometimes get in what you call life-sucking jobs. and that's one of the things I see a lot just in, my regular life, where people are grinding out every day at a job they hate for a salary they need. And it's, how are you able to try to help disconnect the two, the money side and hating your life to going to work every day? That has to be a really difficult thing for someone to do, because I feel like they get kind of hooked on they sort of end up being like a rat on a wheel, if you will.
Yes. And for the most part, I can't overly generalize, but for the most part, that is a choice that they're making for themselves, probably out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was talking to another person last week about the fact that, when you read my book or you talk to me about some of the choices I've made, I never refer to them as sacrifices, right? They're choices that I made that I'm very proud of. For instance, when I quit a full-time, well-paying job to become a full-time musician, and, also that was kind of the impetus of Entire Productions, I moved from our 3-bedroom craftsman house that was on the expensive side to rent.
Yeah.
And I moved me and my young daughter to a 1-bedroom garden apartment. I say garden, she says basement. See, this is the way I see things.
Yeah, right.
I could see the flowers and the plants. It's
right.
a garden apartment.
We'll count it. Yeah.
It was only slightly submerged into the ground, but anyway.
Yeah.
And the truth is, people would say, oh, she's sacrificing a lot for her dreams. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a sacrifice.
That was part of the.
It was just right. And I was happy. Bennett's, my daughter, had her bunk bed over my bed. And turns out that year I made enough money to have stayed in that bungalow, craftsman bungalow. But we stayed at that garden apartment for over a year and a half longer because I loved it. There was no need to move.
Yeah. Well, you bring up an interesting point, because I think a lot of times when an entrepreneur talks to the general public isn't comfortable with the risk.
No.
And they think what you're doing is crazy. And, you have a lot of people go, when I decided to get into my career, my parents were like, you're insane. Why are you doing that? Like, that's an insane thing. Go get a job at a bank and, just work. I go, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. So it is an interesting thing to have people have that perspective of, hey, she's sacrificing all that. And you go, no, this is what I want to do. This is part of the deal, because it doesn't fit their life narrative and what they think is the right way to go.
And honestly, as I look back on my life and the decisions I've made, I'm not sure I was willing to sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I was willing to make a choice that was different than others.
Yep.
But I don't think I would have put myself in that uncomfortable position.
Yeah.
But again, it's just how you look at things. It's how you frame them.
It's all perspective and point of view. I totally agree with you there. So you have a business, obviously you have multiple businesses, but your sort of main business is an event planning company.
Yes.
And then COVID hits and there are no events. So how does that affect you?
That threw me into a physically challenging panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
I had to lay off half of my team, and I did it earlier than people around me, and I felt horrible.
Yeah.
But a couple of weeks after I did it, 80% of our industry was laid off or furloughed. So I actually made a good business decision.
Right. Tough one.
Yeah, it was not cool for the psyche. It was not good in
right.
the long run. But I came up with an idea to continue events with our clients who were, moving to virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited about it that I created this whole deck before I even presented it to my team. We had no proof of concept. We had no way to show people what it was like that moment. I actually also called up the CEO of Mansueto Ventures, which runs Inc. magazine and Fast Company. And I pitched this to him. I mean, I was relentless.
Yeah.
And we ended up saving the company, creating over 200 virtual events.
Wow.
That had faster paced, shorter segments of information with entertainment and interactivity, and with like connectors of different things. It was so exciting. and so fun.
Yeah, I bet.
But it took, it took a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I think I felt sorry for myself for a minute. And then I also thought, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless and sleeping in the doorway downstairs of my building.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a knee-jerk, PTSD response.
Right.
Because at that moment, I forgot about all the skills and the experience that I had.
Yeah. And then you put that to the side and here comes the pivot and you're able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
Yes.
That COVID, I feel like the COVID experience made things really horrible for a lot of companies in the short and depending on your industry and the long term.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it really taught a lot of valuable lessons. And if you had to sort of pick one of the most valuable lessons, what would you say is the most valuable lesson you learned from the COVID experience?
Well, it gave me a moment to step back from the fire hose of business that had been coming into our company for years.
Yes.
And I looked at my spending, right? I cut my overhead in more than half.
Mm-hmm.
And we're operating today with that similar, right?
Yep.
So there was so much money coming in and so much going out. It didn't really matter because, so that was a great lesson, is to tighten things up. And I was quite conservative with spending to begin with.
Right.
So that was, it gave me time to clean up
Mm-hmm.
internally.
Yep.
Systems, processes, people, expenditures.
Get efficient.
Really look at, do I need that subscription?
Yep.
So for instance, we were using Cirrus Insight. Is that what it's called? It's a plugin for Salesforce. And as it turns out, I don't know how much it was. It was quite expensive, maybe $6,000 to $12,000 a year. And we've been operating without it just fine.
Of
for
course.
the last 3 years.
Amazing how that happens. Yeah. That's great. So we're almost out of time. So I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
If you could go back in the beginning of your career and give yourself some advice based off of your frame of reference from today, what would that be?
Find the courses that I took, like the Goldman Sachs 10KSB,
Yeah.
the Entrepreneurial Master's class at MIT or Harvard. Doesn't even have to be those big names, but do the work. That is the shortcut. People, listen to this. Do the work. It's the shortcut. I spent 12 years winging it.
I love that.
Why?
Doing the work is the short. I'm actually writing that down.
Yes.
Doing the work is the shortcut. That's great. If you had to help another female entrepreneur that's considering starting a business, what advice would you give to her? Similar
is make sure that you have a mentor and advisor or more than one of each.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, there's access to that information that I'm telling you about in blogs and YouTube videos, in courses that you can pay for. Lay your foundation firm when you're starting a business.
Yeah, that's
Don't
great.
do what I did.
And wing it.
Don't wing it. Why bother?
Yeah.
Why would you do that to yourself?
You bring up an interesting question about the mentor. So
Yeah.
I would assume you've had at least one, possibly more mentors. Is there one person that sticks out that's that you can point to and say, my life would not be what it is today if I didn't know this person?
Yes. And you know what? I was so proud, and I wanted to do this all behind the veil of I'm so amazing,
Right.
that I didn't reach out to tell people I didn't know what I needed to know.
Yeah.
I was too proud. So I would say in 2015, I had an HR advisor. Her name is Cindy. And I had a business advisor named Tim. And without the two of them, I don't know if I would be where I am today.
You know, it's one of the things that's really come up a lot on these interviews that I've done with business owners, is that they really noticed a ton of growth once they kind of put their ego, check their ego to the side and said, hey, I don't know how to do this stuff. I'm going to put my hand up and say, someone help me. Yeah, that's great. All right. Last question.
Yes.
Hardest question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
You were a wedding singer. What's your least favorite song to sing at a wedding?
I can show you the world. A whole new world.
That's Aladdin. Is that the Aladdin song?
I don't know, but yeah.
All right. Well, flip side, what's your favorite song that you enjoy singing the most?
Gosh, it was so long ago that I was singing at weddings, but cool, quirky songs that had to do with what the couple's, life was. I remember this wasn't singing, but at the end, the recessional, we played the theme from Peanuts.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I love it.
So,
well, this is awesome. I really enjoyed talking to you about your whole background is so inspiring. So that's amazing. So if people want to learn a little bit more about you and your business, where do they go?
You can go to my personal website, which is officialnatashamiller.com, and it will point you into the various directions that you might find yourself wanting to peek at.
And they can buy your book wherever books are sold. And Audible.
Yeah. Audible. I would really highly recommend listening to it.
I'm going to listen to it.
Why cheat yourself out of the multidisciplinary experience?
Well, you have a trained professional entertainer reading their book with music. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what you thought of it, Brian.
Well, I will definitely do that. Thank you very much. So if you want to connect with me on the Untapped app so you can see how I rate these beers that we drink during the show, my username is brcarney7. To learn more about how my firm helps business owners with their financial planning, visit riversedgeadvisors.com. And to hear past episodes of the podcast, go to happy-half-hour.com. Moment of truth for Other Half Brewing, all green, everything, pretty strong beer, 10.5%. I would definitely drink it again, but only one of them. I'm going to give this a 3.75 out of 5 rating for that. Natasha, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And make sure you go pick up Relentless.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Happy Half Hour with an Entrepreneur, sponsored by River's Edge Advisors. For more information on how River's Edge Advisors can help you, visit their website at riversedgeadvisors.com. If you'd like to connect with Brian Carney for business advice or just to share a beer, follow him on Instagram at riversedgeadvisors_LLC.